Greetings, Holy Ones. I am Fabian with CrystalsAvatar.com, and today we'll be talking about the second Founders race. They are the spiritual beings called Seraphei Seraphim, also known as the Gold Flame Solar Rishi. Now, we will be also talking about everything that is connected to the Seraphei Seraphim, such as the Ascended Masters, the Time Matrix, the three Founders races, the Solar Rishi, and also the Royal House of Vega, and also Orion, Arcturus, and the Andromeda, and also about the Cerez bird people, about the Reptilians and the Insectoids, also what's called Aethien Mantis, and the fallen Seraphim races, the Drakonians and the Drakon, and also about Omicron Dragon Moth, the Orion winged Drakon, the hybrid Dracos humans, and also about the bird raptors and dinosaurs, and also the Odedicron bird reptiles, the Anunnaki Draconian hybrids such as Enlil, Enki, and Marduk of planet Nibiru, also about the Necromiton Beetle people, the Andromedas of Andromeda, and the Men in Black, and about the Zeta Gray aliens and the Regalians from Rigel. These are the things that we'll be talking about today in this video. Now, I have placed the time codes in the video description below, so if any of you want to just skip to a different part, please do so. But for the rest of you, we'll be starting at the beginning, because there's a lot to explain up to that point. So thank you for being here, and consider subscribing to this channel if you like what you hear and want to learn more about spiritual awakening. And we talk a lot about these aliens and ETs, including these Seraphei Seraphim. Now, we are getting deeper into this Master Templar Ascension playlist series, and in the previous videos, we were already starting talking about some of the different guardian races that live within the cosmic and universal structures of reality. We first started talking about what is God, okay? That is the highest expanded level, the all-oneness. And God decided to create manifestation to know itself better, and it individualized itself by isolating portions of its own identity into smaller spherical structures of manifest expression. And the first three individualizations within God are those three spherical primal sound fields, okay? And that first sound field is the primary ecstatic sound level, where the Eka level 1 Ascended Masters exist, the highest level. And the second sound field is the secondary Polaric sound level, where the Rishi level 2 Ascended Masters exist. That's the middle level. The final third sound field is the Triadic sound field, where the Geomantic entity level 3 Ascended Masters exist. Now, that's the lowest level, and the smallest too. So the three sound fields together, all three of them are collectively called the cosmos, which is outside of our time matrix. Now, I have already explained in a previous video how the Ascended Masters created countless hologram reality fields called time matrices, and including our time matrix. It's a 15-dimensional system, and each time matrix has 5 levels of density matter that we experience throughout these 15 separate dimensions of reality. Now, Ascended Masters from each of those primary sound fields, they're called the Ecstatic, Polaric, and Triadic levels, okay? They have collectively contributed to creating our 15-dimensional time matrix. And I show you the time matrix diagram so you can get familiar with all the different levels and parts. Every Ascended Master that comes into our time matrix starts at the highest density level. They have to start somewhere, and they start, which is the primal light fields of density 5. And remember, the Ascended Masters don't actually leave those fields. They don't actually go and enter somewhere. They don't physically come into the time matrix. They're Ascended Masters. They're basically projecting their consciousness into the time matrix hologram, and they're all collectively participating with each other, in the hologram reality fields, sort of like what humans do when they play massive multiplayer online video games. A whole bunch of people, right, participating in a world, and they will interact with each other in that world, but those characters are not them, okay? It's the ones, Ascended Masters, the players outside of the game. So we're in the game, we're in the time matrix, okay? But just don't forget, we're Ascended Masters. You and I and all people in all races and creatures are Ascended Masters. But most of us have forgotten that part, right? And there's reasons why we have forgotten our true spiritual identity. And we talk about those reasons here on Crystal's Avatar. Now, we are currently going over to the highest level guardian races, which are those three Founders races. There's not anyone higher than those, okay? So we want to learn about those so we learn about ourselves. And they're within those three primal light fields: the 13th dimensional blue flame Elohai, the 14th dimensional gold flame Seraphei, what we're talking about today, and then the 15th dimensional violet flame Brahma. And I'll be talking about that next. Now, right now, though, it's about the Seraphei, and these highest three dimensions are within density universe 5, which is thermoplasmic antimatter. And I explain what that is, and which is the highest and the most advanced level, within our time matrix. And this is way beyond our lowly, carbon matter universe. So please watch out for the dimensions video that I made before to learn more about the time matrix if you haven't seen that yet, and learn about the real reality structures that we exist within, so you can understand the whole structure. And these three founders races are like collectively called the Universal Trinity. And since they are in density 5, you know, that highest density, they are considered what's called metaterrestrials. Okay, we've talked about extraterrestrials, but these are called metaterrestrials. And they are the three founder races that have, well, actually created and seeded their own like family of genetic extraterrestrial races in the lower density universes. And each of those three metaterrestrial founder races created their own like certain types of life forms and populated those race strains like in different star systems throughout the whole, you know, time matrix. And once you know about these founder races, well, you can begin to look at reality and like realize that there are, well, Elohai trees, there are Seraphei bugs, there are Seraphei trees too, and there are Brahmarama snowflakes, you could say. So you start to realize that there are three collectives of consciousness that not only created other ETs and forms, you know, hominid forms like we are, but also the animals and the plants and the mineral kingdoms. So all of those things, they're all each from one of those three primary founder races matrices that seeded our entire time matrix. So there's three different ones, and it is really fascinating to begin to understand that. And in the previous video, we talked about the blue flame Elohai, okay, from the 13th dimension. They were the first founders race that are incarnating from the Akkadic level 1's Ascended Masters level. But today, in this video, we'll be talking about the second founders race, which is the gold flame Seraphei Seraphim from the 14th dimension, okay, and which are incarnating from the Polaric level 2 Ascended Master level in the primal sound fields. So we talk about these beings and the primal life fields, but don't forget where they're coming from, where their consciousness, where their energy, their spirit is coming from, the Ascended Master levels. The Ascended Master beings are the Solar Rishi. And so they do this progressively. So this means that those, like these progressive, like the good Seraphei, have Polaric DNA templates that carry the complete, like original, there's 42 of them, 42 Polaric level Ascension codes, and they will always keep that potential alive. I talk more about Ascension codes in some of my other videos. But anyways, just like the blue flame and the violet flame, this gold flame Seraphei Seraphim are what's called Solar Rishi. It's a level of consciousness, a type of consciousness. And the Solar Rishi are the conscious collectives of stars, like suns, interchangeably stars, suns, and they appear as like just massive suns or gaseous balls of light, literally different colored spherical beings that populate the three primal light fields of our time matrix. And they are thermoplasmic light radiation. It's basically hot plasma, light in a hot gaseous state. Technically, they're what's called crystal gas, like a vapor, okay? It's before matter solidification. Well, even if you remember from school, even our earth scientists understand how matter, energy, it has changes in its state, or that there's difference between levels of matter state, such as solids, liquids, gases, vapors, Well, take that to another level, to our density, to our matter form, and realize that matter density evolves from our carbon matter, which we're only aware of, right, into carbon crystal silicate, which evolves to crystal silicate, then to crystal liquid, then finally into crystal gas, vapor. Now, as the blue flame Elohai have their emerald order, well, the Seraphei Rishi have their gold order. So the gold order Seraphei Seraphim matrix are basically, let's say, the second in charge in this time matrix. I'm not saying like bosses or, in charge basically only refers to the level of frequency consciousness that they carry within the gold light field, that their Rishi represent. According to the concept of the law of one, right? All is one. Well, then everything is equal in its intrinsic value, right? But it's not equal as far as its amount of energy potential, because every being's going to have more energy capability. But it's what we're talking about is the intrinsic worth. It's always considered equal, okay? Because all are God, okay? The smallest and the biggest. So again, the gold order Seraphei are considered second in charge. It's not a bad thing. So it has to do with energy. And you have well, don't forget about the first ones, the largest ones, the blue flame. And now these second medium-sized ones, it's the gold flame. And then finally, the smallest ones would be the violet flame. The gold flame Seraphei Seraphim, well, they've created a few different organizations at different levels throughout our time matrix, which we will get, familiar with. The gold flame Seraphei race lines basically are charter members of, we've mentioned them before, the Guardian Alliance, and also, well, other gold flame service organizations. And also that the gold flame Seraphei have created what's called the Royal House of Vega, which is reference to that density 4 planet Vega in the Lyra system. And it's, well, constellation. And this Royal House of Vega, it's basically like a group of Seraphei, high-level Seraphei who have had they hold, you would say, hold the Seraphei divine DNA blueprint. Okay, because, you know, DNA blueprints or templates can get messed up. Well, they carry the perfect one, the eternal, you know, forever, and they keep the original genetic potentials for DNA regenesis of any lower level, like distorted seraphim race lines. So this is where DNA regenesis takes place, where like any fallen seraphim that have like distorted their DNA templates can choose, well, any time to go back to honoring the law of one, returning back to love and light. You know, it is forgivable, and they agree to a guardian DNA host matrix. It's not about being forgivable, okay? We're just saying that this is different from what you get from some of the religions. So with the positive, they do this with the positive Seraphei, okay, to help regenerate their negative or mutated DNA. This is how it works with hosts. It's called a host matrix. And so they do, you know, they do this to regenerate their polaric ascension codes, to accrete them back, to develop them once again in order to become Christed again, which means being able to have the ability to ascend out of the time matrix. Otherwise, you know, such beings with like this with distorted DNA templates, they're literally stuck in the time matrix. This is one of the main purposes of this royal house of Vega. It gives all the negative seraphim an opportunity to change back to this positive path. So the gold flame Seraphei also serve as primary guardians in our time matrix, and along with the blue flame and violet flames. But they're also charter members of what's called Interdimensional Association of Free Worlds, and also what's called the Azerite Universal Templar Security Team, and also the Guardian Alliance. And we've already mentioned those, and we talked about them a little bit in the other video, which is called, you know, the Elohim video. And each of these flames are involved in these major administrative services and security. So the 14th dimensional gold flame Seraphei Seraphim, they have created and seeded like different extraterrestrial races that all originally started on planet Vega of Lyra in this 10th dimension of density universe 4. So then most of them eventually moved to Orion constellation system, but also some are in this planet called Arcturus, also in Andromeda, which is another galaxy. And the blue flame and the violet flame have created their own different types of like races and creatures. However, it is the gold flame Seraphei Seraphim that are the creators of this Cerez. It's called Cerez, C-E-R-E-Z. I'll put it on the screen. They're bird people, you know, races of bird people. And these are kind of, you know, some of the angelic type races that were created in the lower densities, you know, angels with wings, right? So this is density 3 and also in density 2. So even though humans are from the blue flame, it's the gold flame Seraphei that have given us an important contribution to the human evolution through their avian hominid Seraphim Cerez races, you know, angel or bird people. It's basically what you call an avian hominid, you know. There's nothing wrong saying a bird people. There's different kinds of animal people. This is a bird people. So in the previous video, I mean, we were talking about the blue flame cat people. Now we're talking about the gold flame bird people. But this is part of where our the future human angel image comes from, the gold flame bird people. And they were, you know, winged hominids. Now, all hominid forms originate out of the blue flame, but this bird wing attribute comes out of the gold flame Seraphei. And well, they literally had wings at some points in their evolution. And at other points, well, they didn't have the wings. So not all angels have wings. Well, in fact, most of them don't. And if you see ones that do have wings, it's not faking it, well, it's probably out of this gold flame Cerez race line. And there's also many lines that were non-winged, but the winged ones usually come out of this gold flame order. So now basically you have the gold flame Seraphei, right? But it's not just bird people. Okay, they primarily have created, besides the bird people, they've created like what most people are familiar with, which are the creators of the reptilians, and also manta beings, you know, and various like insect type of life forms, and including the ones here on Earth, by the way, that we call our little bugs and those kind of things. But these can also be found on other different planets. And there's like, we think of some of these being bad, but there are various benign, or you would say good or not dangerous, insects and reptiles and avians. And so also even dinosaur type races coming out of all from planet Vega. And no, dinosaurs did not originate from our 3 dimension of Earth. We may think so or assume so, but they didn't. These were seeded on Earth about basically 375 million years ago, according to the Guardians, and also were an experiment by other ET races. And we talk about that in a moment. But now when it comes to the visible life forms that we can see on Earth, like the cats, the dogs, and all the kind of things, these are, you would say, indications. These are different affiliations to one of the 3 original founders race matrices that, you know, we're talking about the Seraphei matrix, but there's different that came out of the different ones. So we have humans, most affiliated to the blue flame, cats, and we're also connected to the birds, gold flame birds, really, because our strongest imprints are the blue flame Elohai, and well, certain points there was hybridization done to bring our human race back, you know, to its original angelic heritage, because it got broken. We had to bring it back at one point to a couple of, you know, points to where the gold flame Cerez bird people we just mentioned got directly involved, and they did some hybridization to bring our gene code back up to where it needs to be before it was distorted. So we got some of the bird people connection, Seraphei connection in our gene codes. Now, the gold flame Seraphei Seraphim have an insectoid, that means insect, basically race, called the Aethien Mantis. Now, they look like basically large 12 to 15 feet tall praying mantis, you know, but they are of the density 4 and density 3, not from our reality, density 1. So they are down as far as, you know, the etheric matter density. And I don't know if any of you follow like the UFO movement, but there are like a lot of reports of these big white, you know, mantises that people have basically have encounters with. Sometimes they come in solid looking, sometimes they come in etheric looking, you know, like ghost-like. But these are the Aethien Mantis, and they were created by the Seraphei Matrix. And the Aethien are good guys, okay? They're not on the bad side. They're not out of the fallen Seraphim Matrix. They're trying to help the fallen Seraphim races, you know, get back their 42 Polaric Ascension codes, and well, to start working in ways that are cooperative, you know, with everybody else, right? And now this word Seraphei Seraphim itself isn't like in 2 words, Seraphei Seraphim, but the Seraphim part is reference to some, well, as you may expect, you know, some twisted versions of Seraphei that became what are called the Drakonians, which are classified as what we call them fallen angelic group. And they are the ones that created the Drakon races. Drakon, as in dragon, Drakon, dragon. Seraphim is a reference to the fallen Seraphei. So these Drakonians are considered negative fallen Seraphim, like angelic races. And so because of this, the positive gold flame Seraphei have been appointed to like custodians of the fallen Drakonian race, you know, it's kind of like they go through some rehabilitation efforts, you know, specifically the fallen D10 Omicron Dragon Moth and the Odedicron reptile lines from Vega, originally from Vega, which are the ones that, you know, that became the Drakonian Seraphim fallen angelic race line. So let's go over some of those. And for example, like some of the negative gold flame Seraphim races are the Drakon, the Dracos, also the Zeta gray aliens, and the Necromiton beetle people, the Azrael dark angels, which are like basically like gargoyles, and that also what you might have heard of the avian Nordic hominids. So these were some of the planet Vega's friendly insects and reptile races that became the group called the fallen Drakonian Matrix, which had left Vega and now are centered in this Orion star system, the constellation. And that's in density 4, not in our density, but density 4, dimension 10, Orion. And they created races from there that some of them are running around down here. That's how it works. Up there comes down here. You know, aspects of yourself. You have higher aspects. You're a lower aspect of those higher aspects. We have on this planet a problem with the Drakonian Matrix, which is this fallen Seraphim. It's a family. And they manifest primarily in like reptilian type forms or reptilian hybrid forms. You know, there's a lot of problems with what I like to call also the bud people, or you can say, you know, insectoids. That's like a scientific word. They are races, some of which are good and some of which are fallen, which means they're still good, but just have some real problems, like to make other people's problems. So there's several different versions of Drakonian and like these reptile races. And Drakonian and reptiles are not actually the same thing. Most people think or assume Drakonians are reptiles, you know, that they're the same thing, but it's not. And that's what I'm explaining here. The Drakonian collectives are fallen Seraphim races that originally came from Vega. They were originally from Vega of Lyra up in the 10th dimension of density 4 when they were first created. The Drakonian and reptile races moved out into the Orion star system, most of them, and several like planets even known by our scientists, such as Alnitak and Alnilam. And there's several other planets right in around that area. Each of them were inhabited by like different collectives of reptilians and Drakonian. So the Drakonian agenda races, most of them are from Orion. One of them is from Andromeda. And the ones that are from Orion, you know, the main ones, they're the real nasty troublemaking ones. And they're called Omicron, okay? Now they are a reptilian insectoid hybrid. It's a family name. They are also known as Dragon Moth or you could say they look like a dragon plus a moth. You could say it's a dragon with insect wings, and they're the precursor to an actual dragon. What is dragon? They're the ones that created the Drakonian. Okay, the Omicron Dragon Moth are from density 4. So this is liquid light, dark avatar stuff, and they are in that dimension 10, and they can't go up higher than that. This D10 is their limit. They have a reverse 10-strand DNA template because of what they've done with their energy, with their consciousness. They're fallen beings. They're not nice. And this Omicron is one of the, well, nastiest ETs, one of the darkest. And so one of the main forms that they use, particularly in contact here, they are called the dragon moths. They look like upright hominid moth people, except they're like gray, kind of tannish, form. And you can see them sometimes hanging in people's astral fields. If you turn on the D4 astral vision, they kind of have like dragonish type of body forms. Have you ever seen those like big ugly moths? If you're like looking in like those, if you're studying moths and where they have these really thick, icky looking bodies and like real homely, distorted faces. This is the kind of what these guys look like. They're in a human size. Some of them even bigger. So these high-level 10th-dimensional Omicron Dragon Moth people are the ones that created the 9th-dimensional Orion winged Drakon race, the Drakonians, the Drakon. This is a dragon, basically. As you realize, a dragon, they are the ones that kind of look like, well, they are everything from dinosaur-type beings to what they look like themselves, winged reptilians. The 9th dimension is in density 3, etheric matter, where beings have like a crystal silicate body and are called archangels. So that's a level, again, of consciousness. It's a level of ET. And they tend to take on different forms. If you would see them, they would look like not reptile lizards, but more like dragons, gargoyles, that kind of stuff. That's a little different than your snake types or your little grays, which are actually what you call insect reptile. And they're not Drakon, but they do run the Drakonian agenda. They're friends. Now, while the Drakons are actually density 3 beings, there is a lower density 1 version of them from the Orion star system. It was even approximately like 1 million years ago that this density 1 version of the Drakon had tampered with some of the genetic codes of the human races. That was back in the days of Atlantis and Lemuria, and during the second seeding of the human race, because this is the third seeding. This happened in the second seeding. And it was during this time that these Drakon created some genetic hybrids, okay, within the Earth seeds races called Dracos. This contaminated those human genetic code, and this altered the evolutionary imprint for many of the Atlantean and Lemurian souls. That was their intention. That was their purpose. This is what Drakon do. And these Drakon were expert geneticists and scientists, but they showed little regard for other life forms, and it's because they lacked the spiritual development. And these Dracos human hybrids were more like lizard-like in appearance, with a body and structure more closely resembling humans, but facial features and their temperaments, characteristics of the Drakon. Now, these intrusive visitors of Dracos lineage are in reality a hybrid mutation of our human ancestors who evolved within the Orion star system. And from their point of view, they see themselves as members of the human lineage. They're not. And so they feel entitled to use the territories of Earth, even though their race was banned, right, from here nearly like 850,000 years ago by the Solar Rishi. Thank you. So the Drakon also, a long time ago, had tampered with certain strains of Earth dinosaurs. They didn't just mess around with us, who were seated on Earth, about 375 million years ago. And it was like an experiment, actually. Some other ETs were messing around with these dinosaurs. But the Drakon came along, they took one of them, they created something of their own, kind of like creating an aggressive carnivorous like raptors. And they were like, basically they used them like security guards, like monitors for the captive human populations. And these raptors had like, well, bird-like features. And they were an avian reptilian dinosaur of sorts, kind of like a feathered raptor. And many of the Lemurian and Atlantean cultures of the second seeding, they abandoned their advanced surface cultures and retreated underground to escape the terror of these like avian feathered raptors. And this is somewhat talked about in Corey Good, and he talked about it in detail about how they found feathered raptors in inner Earth or down in the subterranean tunnels. This is something that has come out, okay? And so that's something you can resonate with or not. But I'm telling you from the Guardian perspective, it was 1 million years ago when they created these creatures on Earth. The raptor things underground, and that's what was terrorizing the Atlanteans and Lemurians at a point in time. Okay, so there is also another fallen seraphim group called the Odedicron. So the Odedicron are the reptile avian type. So they're like winged reptile kind of like things. Not like big heavy bodied ones like the Drakon are, but more like thin, small body ones, more hominid-like, but most often winged. They are bird reptiles, reptiles with bird wings and other bird features. Now the Odedicron are what crossed, mixed with the Anunnaki. Which are opposing factions, right? So they're like two enemy gangsters that are like, some of them became genetically hybridized to create another race, a hybrid race called the Enlil matrix. So, which was put on the infamous planet Nibiru, what some people call Planet X. And I talk about that too here on Crystal's Avatar. So in a previous video, so check that out. So, when you hear like the Sumerian stories of the gods, Annu, Enki, Enlil, Marduk, we've heard of those Sumerian gods. We basically are talking about this Anunnaki Draconian hybrids. That's what they are. And they're different kinds of hybrids too. You had the Omicron Dragon Moth hybridized with Anunnaki to create the Marduk hybrid race family line. You've heard of Marduk. The Enlil ones came out of genetically hybridizing the Odedicron reptilian avians race with the Anunnaki, So that created another race too. So these hybrids are all on planet Nibiru, and they have been responsible for many of the human dramas on Earth. And I'm going to be going over that record. There's like 50,000 years plus of them on our planet. So, but I will demonstrate in another video, but also just the Drakonians. There's another fallen seraphim group that's called the Necromiton, who actually have like even higher strand than the Drakonians. That's only because they have been involved with some of the higher Anunnaki DNA, so they picked up more than just the normal 10-strand pattern, And we'll get into the Necromiton more later. We'll just mention that they're one of the fallen seraphim insect matrices that hybridized with the Anu Elohim Anunnaki. And so that created another race too. So, but the Necromitons are known as the beetle people, or sometimes even the beetle tortoise people, okay? That's what they've been described as. They're kind of like insect reptile things, and they're also known as the Andromedas. You've heard of that word before. That's who these are, okay? So when you hear people having Andromeda channels, 9 times out of 10, that's who they're talking about. That's who they're talking to. And these guys, the Necromitons, are the ones that organize what's called the United, Intruder Resistance. And that's kind of recent in the past decade or so, by bringing in the opposing factions of the Anunnaki forces and the Draconian forces like together into one big bad baddie. These are also the guys that are manifesting down here as the Men in Black. The Men in Black are real. There's something to these creatures that have been talked about. And these Men in Black are on the planet, and they're directing a lot of the Illuminati forces. And there's a real problem with them that emerged even in like modern times. So that's the Necromiton, and they're out of Andromeda. They also have contacts in Alpha and Omega Centauri. Centaurs are real. We're talking about creatures from different planets, right? So we'll talk about the Necromiton, and the only reason why I'm bringing them up in our, in your attention now is because so you've heard the word and some type of context in the stuff that we're talking about. So out of the same Seraphim matrices, you have created the peaceful Aethien, right? The Mantis. But out of those insectoids, there is a part of the Aethien Insectoids that became fallen friends with the Drakonian reptilian ones. They create some various different like insect forms in the constellation of Orion. One of these groups are presently been identified in our culture and within the inner like circles of those who investigate such visitations. And this group has become known as the little gray aliens. Okay, what most people think are aliens. Obviously, there's a lot more different types of aliens out there, but the ones that you're familiar with are these Zeta Reticuli. Those are what's the great aliens, originally from the planet Apaxian Lao. And it is this Zeta-affiliated groups, such as the Reptilian Dracos, that have been in contact with our government and are responsible for much of what we have come to call the UFO alien abduction phenomena. It's a real phenomena. It really happens. People have been hypnotized and explain exactly what they have been through, what they have come from. So the Zeta represent more than just the little grays, okay? The small grayish beings with the large black eyes, okay? Other types of Zeta have been described by witnesses as blues and browns and silvers. So all which possess, some human-like or dwarf-like characteristics and who represent a group of Zeta mutations, created through their experiments. They do a lot of experiments, so many experiments, it's kind of like genetic engineering. It kind of creates some problems. So the blue-skinned Zephelium, you probably heard of, are the administrator caste of these Zetas, the small Zetas, and they govern all the lower-ranking Zeta castes. And the Zetas are basically a fragmented species, and their customs and policies differ widely amongst their various groups, each different groups. different agendas. So now what these Zeta groups are the beings that live on a planet that orbit the star Rigel in the Orion constellation, which are, erroneously called the Regelians, okay? I'm just making a small little correction. The correct name for this Zeta race is actually, it's according to the Guardians, it's called the Fushi. And it is this aggressive Fushi, Regelians, okay, who have dominated the other Zeta races. They're not nice to the other Zetas. They kind of like trying to control them. Starting from the fourth dimension, that's the time cycle, the majority, basically the other ones finally got tired of this, okay? They sought the Guardians' help and protection. And this happened, actually, around 1984. So at the beginning point of where these, like, different extraterrestrial races and creations are in their original form, we talk about them being bad, but none of them are bad or fallen up there. They have integrity in their higher parts. They all have a divine blueprint, and they express that divine blueprint. This means there are good insects, there is good reptiles, there's good dinosaurs, all of that kind of thing. Some people are bringing up, information that the Seraphim are all bad guys. I'm here to tell you, no. Are you practicing Law of One or not? It kind of gets put over into the Seraphei family, the good Seraphei. And it's not all Seraphei family lines they're not all negatively oriented. Only some of them are. So when we refer to the fallen reptile and draconian matrices, we're just referring to just groups of them that had fallen, just like a group of the Elohai even fell, right? So it's not that all things of reptilian nature or all things of dragon nature are bad. No, we're not. So please keep that in mind. There are good ones and there's bad ones, just like there's good humans and bad humans. Now, regarding all of this, Seraphei Seraphim races that we spoke about today, this was just basically an introduction to each one. And I will be making, don't worry, separate videos for each race. For example, I will have a separate video just about the Drakon and also a separate video just about the Zeta Gray aliens, etc. So I thank you for watching this video today, guys, about the Gold Flame Seraphei Rishi, which is the second of 3 founder races. That means we're going to talk about the third one after this one. So if you like what you have learned today in this video, please like and subscribe. And you definitely want to click on the next video that comes up on the screen here, because in that video, we'll be going over the third founder's race called the Violet Flame Brahmarama, and also talk in depth about the Royal House of Aethien, and also the Amethyst Order, and the Great White Brotherhood, some of you have probably heard of, and the Council of Alcyon Pleiades, and also about the Keepers of the Violet Flame, about the Triadic Ascension Codes. And we'll be talking about how the Violet Flame are the creators of the Pegasus, avian horse deer, beings, and also the Innu cetacean whale people, and also where the aquatic dolphins came from, and the Yoni, it's called the Yoni aquatic apes, and so much more, you guys. So you definitely want to click on that video. And I appreciate you for being here. Some of you are what's called starseeds and indigo children, light workers, empaths. Well, we have a community here of these type of consciousness learning about these things. You're learning about what these ETs and beings really are, and they're not all bad, but some of them are, and you need to know that. So I appreciate you being here, and this is just the beginning, you guys. There's so much more to learn, and because you have learned about these beings from science and religion. Well, gee, we're showing you the Guardian point of view, an undistorted, unmanipulating point of view. And as this giant puzzle picture becomes more clear, you will realize these things yourself. You will feel it. You will resonate it. See you in the next video. Peace. Namaste. Machiwa Kayes.